This is a very rare opportunity. I'm here with the brand new W09 2018 Mercedes Formula One car. But the rare thing is I'm here with last year's as well. Very unusual to find two in the same place, but it gives me an opportunity to compare the two cars together to show some of the things we've put onto the new car. Now, it's completely impossible to do justice to the work of well over 1,000 people who've been on this project for over a year. Completely impossible to do justice to that in just a few minutes, but I can show you a couple of the major things. The biggest thing by far that you're going to notice when you look at the new car are things that are made obvious by regulatory change. So the biggest one, the one that strikes you as soon as you see the car, is the halo. This is a new rule for 2018, a new piece of equipment that goes on the car aimed at protecting the driver's head, protecting his head from incidents such as a tyre coming loose from another car and hitting the cockpit area at speed, something which would be a fatal event. So very important for the driver's safety and a new feature for this year. A very, very big visual difference, something which is, as I've said before, an acquired taste and something which we'll be working on in the seasons to come to try and make more exciting to look at and also to offer more protection to the head of the driver. The next regulatory change is actually not an addition, it's an absence, and probably easier to see by looking at last year's car. You can see on last year's car this very prominent engine cover fin and the T-wings. Not the nicest looking things, and something which was there almost as a regulatory accident. So for this year, we tried to change the rules to get rid of those features, and you can see the result. A much reduced fin on the back of the engine cover here, and no T-wing, no big T-wing. So that's the other big visual change. After that, we're getting into the sort of changes that we as a team have made to try and make our car the quickest out there, to try and make our car competitive. Now, the biggest one of those is down here in the side pod. We've done an awful lot of work down there to try and make that car really slender. And if you compare it to this car, you can just see the difference. You can see that the bodywork bulges out around about where the engine and exhaust pack is. On the new car, this is a much more slender thing. It doesn't look like much of a difference, but actually when you add it all up, that is something like 1/4 of a second just there. And it doesn't look like much of a difference, but it was actually a huge amount of work. A lot of hair got lost in that project. But the end result is something which is pretty to look at, but much more importantly is an awful lot quicker. After that, you start to get into things that are much more subtle, and you need to be something of a petrol head or an anorak to really notice. But if the sharp-eyed ones amongst you will probably notice that this front suspension looks quite a lot different to last year's. The wishbones have been raised. That's something which has been a trend on Formula One cars in the last few years. Raising those front wishbones brings better aerodynamic performance. It's a big structural challenge, but it's definitely something that brings you more downforce and a quicker car. After that, to understand the differences between these two cars, you start to need a camera. You start to need to take pictures of one and compare it against the other. And that will happen during the year because there are a lot of pictures going to emerge of this car once we start racing it. And it's the sort of thing that people like to do, to compare these shots in detail and point out all the little surfaces that we've changed. Because across the entire car, across every part of its surface, we've made it new. We found different ways of doing it, found improved ways of getting downforce and performance into the car. Each one of them is small in isolation, but they add up in their totality to something that is enormous. Last year's car was the quickest one out there. It won more races than any other, and it was, of course, the championship winner. But last year's car would be utterly hopeless. It would be blown away by this one, because of all that work by all those people over an entire year, making modifications at every level, all of them small, but all of them accumulating to a huge end result and a car that is just much faster.